welcome. This is the second part video. This is the sewing video for the off shoulder corset drape dress. Before we start the video, please subscribe. Please subscribe, like my video. Thank you so much. So these are the materials that I use. This is a satin. I used it as my bias, and this is my Ankara print. I also put this one here in case if you want to use. I didn't use this a soft stay if you want to make your top part of your dress very thick. I also used a bun. The bunning, I used the black one, which is larger than the white one. That's the zipper. I used an invisible zipper, my thread, my pins, my lining. This lining, I like this lining because it's a little bit thick and easy to sew on. Also the black paper glue, I used it for the cover and also for the top part of the dress. Why the net? I've had this net like forever. I got the net on AliExpress, so you can, this is optional if you don't want to use a net for that damp part. If you don't want anything revealing, you can switch it with the fabric. You can use the fabric or you can use any other thing, or you can also line the net with the fabric, you know. So I have placed my pattern on my fabric. I use the grain line as the guide, so your fabric has to be in fold before cutting. I did that also for the net, using the grain line as a guide to cut, and it has to be on fold too. So you cut the cover in fold, and for the cape you join the back pieces on both sides of the front cape, just like so, and you cut as a whole. You have to cut this as a whole, and in fold you fold your fabric and you cut it as a whole. For the right skirt, I placed it on the front of my fabric. I spread it by 4 inches using the grain line as a guide to make sure it is straight on my fabric before cutting it out. For the left pattern, I placed it on the right side of my fabric and cut. While the lining for the right side, I just covered the slash line and cut out my lining. So it's time to sew the front top piece of the dress. So I pin and sew the sides of the net. After sewing, I trimmed and pinned my bias at the joining sides. So while making your bias, please ensure that it's the same size, just a little space to sew the edges, but enough for you to be able to insert your bone into the bias. So what I did was to measure my bias and trim. Ensure that you sew really close to the edge of the bias. If you don't get it the first time, you can loosen it with your seam ripper and you can sew. So now I attached my front piece together. As you can see, I used the paper stay. So if you want it to be a bit thicker, you can use the paper stay. So what I did was to attach and pin both the fabric and the lining and sew. Once I'm done sewing, I attach the lining on the main fabric and sew the armhole side and the other side. After sewing, I trimmed so it will be easy for me to flip it to the other side. The next step was to sew the cover just on one side of the cover. After sewing, I trimmed so close to that V look so I can have that V cuff there. So you can see I did that, and I also ironed that using the paper stay so I can make it a little bit thicker. So it's time for me to attach the front part together just like so and sew around. So you just watch what I did. So here we go. I trimmed and I also used my zigzag stitches and also iron. The next step was to sew the cape, that's the off shoulder sleeve, on both sides. After sewing, I trimmed and also flip it up and turn it over. So it's time to align my cape, that's the sleeve. So I pin the cape facing the back of the top so I can flip it to the front. So I sewed 2/8 inch, just something really close to the edge like so. Once I'm done, I sewed my bias for my bone. So you can either put your bias and sew. If you know, you can get a straight line, but I know I can make it straight while sewing because it will wiggle while I'm sewing. So I decided to sew first, then create a space and insert the bias for my bone. So if you can get a straight line and you know it will not wiggle, then you can sew while attaching your cape. If not, you can just do the same thing, just create a space there after you have placed your bias, and open that space and insert your, you know, this for sure, you know it's not going to move or wiggle, and you get a perfect straight line. As you can see, it's straight. So all I did was to turn it around and sew on the open space. The next thing was to sew on the edges of the bias tape all the way down. So my needle bent because of the thick top of the bias tape, but it's all good. We are learning. So the next step is to insert my bone into the bias. So I cut the bone, leaving the half-inch joining allowance. So you just have to cut because you can't, I don't want to sew on the bone while joining the bottom to the top. So I bunt the tip both sides because I don't want it to fray, so I just bunt the rubber so it will join together. So now is to stuff. This is the part I like so much. Nah, I don't like this part. So it's time for me to stuff it right inside up to the top. If you're following, you have to do these parts. So all done. I've inserted the bone and it looks really good. So it's time to sew the lining of the front piece. So you just pin on the side and sew. So for the right side of the skirt, I use the lining as a guide so I can gather the draping part together so it's the same size as the lining there, which is the actual pattern for the skirt. So you can try and drape whichever way you want. So I went for the plating all the way up, facing up. I plated it facing up. Once I'm done with the drape, I place the lining on the front side of the right skirt and pin and sew, flip over, then press. So I'm done with the sewing and the pressing, so it's just time for me to attach the front piece together. So I just attach them and sew them. So once I'm done sewing, it's time for the back. So the back is a breeze, people. It's like sleeping and sewing. So you just attach the sides together, same for the lining, and sew. So this is it. So the next thing was to sew the dot. So the dot, I always put this dot line so I know where my dot is. So I just pin and sew. So I did that for the lining, but before I sew my dot, I always check to know that the top parts and the bottom parts, the dot line, are aligned. I don't want to sew the dot and it's somewhere and the other dot is somewhere, so I always check to make sure that they are aligned before doing that. So this is it. You just join the top and the bottom part piece together. We have 4 pieces, so you join them to make them 2 pieces. And also I did that for the lining, and that is it. The next thing I did was to attach my invisible zip. I have a video on how to attach an invisible zipper with a manual machine, because I'm going to use my butterfly manual sewing machine. So this is it. I've prepped it. That's using my needle and thread, sewing close to the teeth, and so I didn't find my my footer, my zip footer, so I had to use this one. So this is it. I have sewn the zipper and sewed down all the way to the length of the dress. So I had to open and close to make sure my zip can freely move up and down without any hindrance. Next step for me was to attach my lining. So I just pin on the armhole and the top. I also folded the side where the zipper is. So after sewing, I flipped that over. I trimmed first, then flip over. Then you can press. If you're following, you can press. The next step for me was to cover my zipper. So I did 2 style here, 2 methods here. I did the one really close to the teeth and the one not really close to the teeth. For the one close to the teeth, you have to make sure that the lining is really flat, together with the dress. It's not puffing out anywhere, unless it will get stuck into your zipper and you won't be able to zip all the way down. Or you can just save yourself the stress and don't sew really close to the teeth. That way you can freely zip close. So you can see what I did here. I did one really close to the zipper and the other one. So that part, I have to make sure that my lining is really flat down, unless my zipper gets stuck there. Next is to cut out fabric for my plating at the side. There's plating that gives the illusion of big hips, that shakara thing at the side. So this is my measurements. The measurement I used. So I just did the plating and attach it So you watch. So this is the close-up look of what I've done. We're getting to the end of the video. So the next step is to attach the front and the back piece together. I did so and I pinned round and sew. I always try my clothes on for fitting to see if I can proceed or if I need to adjust any parts, if I need to make it loose, if I need to make it fitted, slimming, you know. So I have done this part, so I didn't record that part. The next part is just to sew inside, that's the back of the back dress, and flip to the front of the back dress. That is just it. And also the edge there, you sew it really close to the teeth of the zip and you're good, just like so. I like to pin, and if you're following, you can pin so it just so it's stable before you start sewing. So this is it. I'm almost done. The next step was to hem the bottom, and that is it. Hem the bottom and I have a new dress. So thank you for watching. I hope you like the video. Please give me a thumbs up, and also subscribe my people. Please subscribe to encourage me. Bye bye.